The Dodgers have announced a massive trade, completing the first ever 5-for-1 trade. Skouval flatly rejects the Mets and joins the Dodgers on a 6-year contract. Hye-sung, Glasnow, and Rushing are also in emergency trades. The baseball world just got turned upside down. The Los Angeles Dodgers have completed what may be the most shocking trade in modern MLB history, a 5-for-1 blockbuster deal that nobody saw coming. And if that wasn't enough, Skouval, one of the most coveted players in this year's trade market, has flatly rejected the Mets and signed a 6-year contract with Los Angeles. On top of that, Hye-sung, Tyler Glasnow, and Rushing are all reportedly in emergency trade talks. This is not a normal day in baseball. This is a seismic shift in the entire power structure of the league. What does this all mean? Let's break it down. First, let's start with the headline. A 5-for-1 trade. That phrase alone should tell you how serious the Dodgers are. In the entire history of Major League Baseball, we have never seen a trade structured like this. 5 players moving in one direction for one single player going the other way. The sheer imbalance of that number tells you everything about how highly Los Angeles values this acquisition. This isn't just a roster move. This is a statement. The Dodgers are not rebuilding. They are not being patient. They are going all in, right now, in the most aggressive way possible. What did you think when you first heard this news? Honestly, my first reaction was disbelief. A 5-for-1 trade is something you see in video game franchise mode, not in real life. But when you think about it from the Dodgers' perspective, it starts to make sense. They have the deepest farm system in baseball. They have the payroll flexibility to absorb any financial hit. And more importantly, they have a championship window that they absolutely cannot afford to waste. If there's any organization in baseball that can make a trade like this work, it's Los Angeles. But let's talk about what makes this trade truly historic. It's not just the number of players involved. It's the quality of what the Dodgers gave up. When a team gives up 5 pieces in a single deal, typically those are filler prospects and depth players. But this deal was different. The Dodgers moved legitimate assets. Players that other organizations would have been thrilled to receive. And yet they did it without hesitation. That tells you how much they value the player coming back. This is not a panic move. This is a calculated, aggressive, well-thought-out decision by one of the smartest front offices in the sport. Now let's talk about Skouval. Because this part of the story is just as big as the trade itself. He rejected the Mets. Flatly. Not a negotiation that fell apart. Not a contract that was close but couldn't get done. A flat rejection. Think about what that means. The Mets offered him a deal, and Skouval looked at it and said, "No, I want to go to Los Angeles." That kind of decision tells you something very powerful about where players want to play right now. The Dodgers have built something that goes beyond just money and wins. They have built an environment that attracts elite talent at every level. From free agents to trade targets to international signings, the best players in the world are choosing Los Angeles. From a player's perspective, that rejection of the Mets is completely understandable. You're choosing between 2 organizations. One that has been to the World Series recently and has an established infrastructure of winning. And another that has spent heavily but hasn't quite put everything together yet. When you're a player of Skouval's caliber, you don't just look at the contract. You look at the roster around you, the coaching staff, the culture, and most importantly, the realistic path to a championship. Skouval looked at all of that and chose the Dodgers. That's not an insult to the Mets. That's just reality. And then there's the 6-year contract. This is a significant commitment from both sides. The Dodgers don't hand out 6-year deals casually. When Los Angeles locks someone in for that length of time, they are betting on that player being a cornerstone of their organization well into the future. This isn't a short-term rental. This isn't a 1-year prove-it deal. This is a long-term partnership. Skouval is now a Dodger not just for this season but potentially for the next chapter of the franchise. That's how serious this is. What about the ripple effects across the league? Because that's what people are missing in the initial excitement of this news. When a team like the Dodgers makes a move this bold, it changes the calculations of every other contender. Teams that were planning their own moves now have to adjust. The trade market just got more complicated. The free agent market shifted. The entire competitive balance of the National League West has been altered. And this is happening in the middle of the season, which makes it even more disruptive. Now let's get to the other names in this story. Kim Hye-sung, Tyler Glasnow, and Rushing. These aren't small names. These are significant players with significant value. The fact that all three of them are reportedly in emergency trade discussions right now, on the same day as the Skoúval deal, tells you that the front offices across baseball are scrambling. When one domino falls this big, it forces everyone else to react. Teams that were comfortable with their rosters are suddenly feeling the pressure to make moves before the window closes. Kim Hye-sung is particularly interesting to discuss here. He brings a completely different profile to whatever team acquires him. His defensive value is elite. His ability to impact a game without a big statistical line is something that advanced metrics have been screaming about for years. If he ends up on a contender, he could be the piece that quietly makes everything else work. Sometimes the most important trade deadline acquisition isn't the one that gets the biggest headline. Sometimes it's the player who fills the exact gap that a team didn't even know they had. Glasnow is a different conversation entirely. When healthy, he is one of the most dominant starting pitchers in the American League. The key phrase there is when healthy. Any team acquiring Glasnow is making a bet on his durability, and that is not a small bet. But the upside is enormous. A healthy Glasnow in October is a genuine difference maker. If a contender can get him and he stays healthy through the postseason, they instantly become a more dangerous team. That's the gamble. And in a tight pennant race, teams are willing to take those gambles. As for Rushing, the intrigue there is about potential. He hasn't put up the numbers that would make him a household name yet. But the tools are undeniable. There are organizations in this league that look at Rushing and see a player who, with the right development environment and the right role, could be a key contributor for years. These emergency trade discussions suggest that multiple teams have identified him as a target worth moving quickly for. When you see urgency around a player like that, it usually means there's more to the story than what's publicly available. What does all of this mean for the Dodgers specifically? It means they are operating on a completely different level than the rest of the league right now. In a single news cycle, they have completed a historically unprecedented trade, secured a top free agent target who rejected another major market team, and positioned themselves to potentially add more pieces before the deadline. The depth of their resources allows them to do things that simply aren't possible for most organizations. They can absorb the cost of a 5-for-1 trade. They can hand out a 6-year commitment with confidence. They can pursue multiple targets simultaneously. That's not luck. That's the result of years of smart roster construction, smart financial planning, and smart talent evaluation. From a competitive standpoint, this is genuinely alarming if you're a rival. The Dodgers were already considered the favorites in their division and a serious World Series contender before today. Now, after this news, the gap between them and the rest of the field just got wider. Not impossible to overcome, but wider. The other contenders in the National League are going to have to seriously evaluate whether they can match what Los Angeles is building right now. The most important thing to understand about today's news is that it isn't just about this season. The 6-year deal with Skoúval. The investment in the 5-for-1 trade. The aggressive positioning in the Kim Hye-sung and Glasnow discussions. All of this is the Dodgers signaling that they are not just trying to win now. They are trying to build something that dominates for the next half-decade. That is a frightening thought for every other team in this league. The baseball world woke up to a very different landscape today. The Dodgers made history. Skoúval made his choice. And the rest of the league is left trying to figure out how to respond. One thing is certain. This trade deadline just became the most important and most dramatic one we've seen in years.